Kafe in Taberna.
It is Wednesday, dear friends and detractors. Weary Wednesday. Wednesday of the pop quizzes. Wednesday of the finals week. Or perhaps you are the wage slave in the cage about to crack today. It is Wednesday, but it doesn't need to be an evil day. For on Wednesday, we offer needful succor. Somewhere in the Alps, on the border of Ruhpolding, Bavaria, and the Habsburg lands, is a cafe, where your palate may be cleansed and spirit refreshed with the purest, cool, sacrosanct water and the richest of coffees freshly pilfered from Ottoman and Arab caravans, where you may read the pamphlets in the papers free of charge, the latest tweets, the most stupid articles, and even some things that are actually worth of insight. For in Kafe and Taberna, we may converse. How's it going, guys? With me today is, as always, in this new show format, Classical Theist.
Hello.
Cool. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
Good. We're as always a bit of a rough start the first time, but also with us is Terilien, going by a different name on Twitter. I don't know if you want to broadcast that.
Yeah, I don't want to broadcast it. I'm trying to keep a low profile, but anyone who knew me would easily recognize my account if they saw it.
You'll know
They'll
him if you see
identify
him.
him by his posts.
Yeah.
And of course, joining us from the swamps is the most autistic of aristocrats, the most aristocratic of the turmeric monsters of the soul. From Isildur's Shack, we have Meme Friar with us.
Hello.
I like mashed potato.
You do?
Good for you.
I do too. I just saw a BAP tweet like that.
I like mashed potato with a bit of cream in it.
So-
I like mashed potato with a bit of cumin and turmeric.
So, this is
Of
Kafe
course, you
and
do use subcontinental.
This is Kafe and Taberna, your weekly comfy conversation podcast, distinct from normal in Taberna, in which we discuss things that are more timely, perhaps of a less permanent nature, whether it be tweets, articles, things that have popped up in the weeks prior to the Wednesday, if we keep this on Wednesdays. But we've read some stuff, done some stuff, but I suppose Classical Theist, we discussed for a comfy casual show. We've done a little bit of prep for this, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean a bit more than I thought, but yeah. So what we're kind of gonna get into here is in response to a tweet thread that I saw the other day. I won't name who tweeted it out because this person has kind of retracted a bit since then. But basically, the substance of it was, well, first of all, like this person is, for all intents and purposes, an Orthodox Catholic. Writes for this. He wrote an article for this pretty Orthodox a Catholic apostolate that we also won't name. But it was basically just like asking quote unquote LGBTQ people what they need in order to be satisfied with the church's outreach to them or whatever, and I guess I kind of ripped into it, and I guess that's kind of what we'll talk about today.
Well, I mean, the first thing I'd like to point out is no one ever posts threads asking what the pastoral needs of neo-Nazis are.
Well, they're not morally equivalent, you see.
Well, yeah, sodomy is way worse.
Yes.
The difference is that gay people are creative and funny and quirky and the protected class in our society now.
And they will make your living room absolutely darling.
Yes. We're already kind of showing our cards a little bit, but so this lady who, you know, I kind of hope she listens to this, just, you know, out of originally we were going to discuss her article about exiting radical traditionalism and being more explicit, but the thread, and we might talk about that another time, but her thread on Twitter turned out to be a lot more interesting. Which has she deleted the thread, CT?
I don't think so. I don't think so, actually. Well, it's actually kind of a bit fortunate that this came out after her thread on radical like traditionalism, because in a way it kind of shows that if you're like one of these people that like for lack of a better term, like virtue signals about how non-trad you are, like this kind of like lame like cringe kind of normie take on gay people is probably going to follow suit for in
It is fairly inevitable that if you okay, so what I'm saying is your opinions, they kind of line up, right? And it's pretty easy to tell which way you're going to swing once you have made even one, like even a small part of your ideology, or however else you want to.
Bad opinions breed bad opinions.
Yes.
They correlate with one another.
If I can kind of
there's a G factor of bad opinions.
I mean, I guess let's just like summarize like what the actual tweet was.
Sure.
Basically what she said, and I want to make sure to get some of these like phrases right, because it cuts to the heart of the problem that I actually had with it, where she's like, to those faithful Catholics who explicitly identify as LGBTQ plus, what can the church do to assist you in your spiritual journey, or whatever. The last part's not necessarily as important to me, because the central issue that I had with it, and I think reflects an unfortunate trajectory that I see, particularly among post-trads, is the willingness to embrace language and terminology that is already crafted by our enemies, such as the LGBTQ plus label itself, and just an uncritically examined assumption that a faithful Catholic could even explicitly identify with these kinds of labels. I think it kind of shows that like normie conservative Catholics have already ceded much more than they would be willing to admit.
To make a topical joke, I identify as a non-practicing buck breaker.
We will let the historians determine what that means.
Yeah,
but
we're going to leave the future historians to decode that statement.
I'm sorry for interrupting
what can the Catholic Church do to accompany Tariq Nasheed on his spiritual journey?
The Catholic Church do to accompany people who really, really, really like hentai doujinshis.
Right.
What can Mother Church do to people who really want to put pencils up their noses?
Right. And so the thing is the one thing that, because CT and I both read the new Homophiles articles from Crisis Magazine, which I read through the archive all the way back to like 2013 till the present. And do you want to just kind of talk about that, CT, for a second? Because I know everybody's here for you anyway.
You have a very good breakdown of like the sort of factions within this, like among these new homophiles and their detractors. I was wondering if maybe like you could explicate that a bit.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. So the thing is that this lady's thread, it got attacked. So I feel like that she said in her like exiting Rad Trad post, which, I mean, we can say it because we're not trying to beef or something. It was on the Reason and Theology WordPress, their website, and she talks about not being a normie, but normie is like a relative term. So a lot of people. So before I get into like the new Homophiles archive on Crisis Magazine's website, a lot of people in the so-called online right circles will get angry at like this poor young mother. She's only 21, posting of things like, well, what can we do? Because it's like we know, either explicitly from having researched the subject or implicitly from being in the circles, and you hear about the horrible stories of what's going on as a consequence of the normalization of homosexual behavior in society.
To circle back a bit, if you're aware of like Tariq Nasheed's like buck breaking discussions, they do much like they do much like worse than that. I mean,
yeah, and we have tons of cases now where kids' parents are legitimately afraid of their children being told that they're LGBTQIA plus, any non-normal identity. And the thing is too is it's like we'll kind of get into the weeds a little bit. But so like this young lady, like, I feel like she doesn't have the context. Like, she's obviously just trying to help, but it's like, no, there's a whole context of this going on. And so these articles on Crisis Magazine that we talked about is Austin Roos, and Austin, who I'd like to talk to sometime.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by how on point he was in those articles.
I feel like the theme of In Taberna's return is us learning to be nicer to our elders.
But yeah,
even when they don't deserve it, or especially.
So give
when
a
they
quick
don't deserve
rundown
it.
of the article.
Yeah, so it's a series of articles. So Austin Roos is an old Catholic culture warrior warhorse. He's been fighting essentially the normalization of the homosexualist ideology and the homosexual behavior for decades now. He's done lobbying work with the UN, and he's worked with tons of pro-family groups, and well before and after Ogerville v. Hodge, which was the case that legalized same-sex marriage in the United States. But so he, in about 2013, he discovered a group that he dubbed the New Homophiles. And it was interesting reading these articles because you can see the impact that they've had all of these years later, now in 2021. But essentially, this group he called the New Homophiles are gay, self-identified gay Christians that are living celibately. Someone that a lot of people might recognize is Eve Tushnet. And there's a couple of other luminaries in that group that we'll talk about. But essentially, they emerged from the Gay Christian Network, which was a message board / community of mostly undergraduate, graduate students in theology and related like Christian sort of studies, to talk about the issue of homosexuality and Christianity, right? And so from the Gay Christian Network, kind of a slang started being developed, and official sides within their reading group. Essentially, this is very on point. I'm realizing because we're essentially a reading group. We're a little salon circle talking about a salon circle that we're gonna criticize, right? The more things change, the more they stay the same. And so from the Gay Christian Network, there is Side A, Side B, and then later what they dubbed Side X. And so Side A is essentially that they say that, and so each side has its own milieus within the milieu, obviously, as all things are, but roughly, broadly, Side A is that they believe in the Bible, but they think that homosexual activity, i.e. sodomy, is allowable in the context of Christian marriage, which obviously anyone that's done any study of like Catholic anything outside of a university, and I say outside of a university because we all know about the decline of academia, and that's what allows this direct, but like already people that are sensible are like, this is bonkers, that's nuts. Okay, but that's Side A.
I mean, look at what the church fathers said about gay sex.
Right.
I mean, John Chrysostom says it causes earthquakes.
St. Bonaventure said that like all sodomites died on Christmas. So I mean, like, that just goes to show how just radically outside.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
people will say, for
Orthodoxy
example, that the term intrinsically disordered is hurtful. It's like, dude, the saints would think that we're pussies for using the term intrinsically disordered.
Yeah.
I mean, Catherine of Siena said that sodomy is the single worst sin and that demons are disgusted by it.
She was a mystic too, so she would know.
So disgusted by it, in fact, that they would turn away, even as they encouraged their victims to engage in it.
It's because
they encouraged it precisely because of their hatred of man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before people like the lady walk away and you think we're being too harsh, just stick with us, have a cup of coffee and just hear us out. So that's Side A.
Yeah.
So Side B is that they agree with the traditional Christian doctrine that marriage is only allowable, that sexual activity is for the purpose of children and it's for marriage. And so that's Side B. And so Side B is who we're going to be really dealing with, because a lot of people, especially at the time, just prior to Pope Francis and just early in his papacy, were like, oh, these people are trying to live the gospel, and they're but they're like affirming their identity as queer, and so we should talk. This is interesting, but there's insidiousness here. But then,
if I could give some quick context,
go ahead.
Like in the Synod on the Family, there was I remember this. I wasn't planning on talking about it, but I do remember it. There's a very specific controversial passage in like one of the relatio documents. It was either a relatio document or it was just like one of some synodal discussion that happened during the Synod on the Family in 2014.
It was a relatio.
Okay, and it had to do with whether what the church should do about the unique gifts and qualities that like homosexual persons bring to like the table, and like how the church can like pastorally outreach to them or whatever. And I think it's this idea that and I know we'll get to this, but this idea that like the homosexual condition, the
the disordered inclinations, that it can actually be seen as like an affirmative identity with ontological positivity that can be a source of uniquely good traits that you couldn't really have if you weren't homosexual, and that we have to treat this as some kind of maybe even gift of God desired by his antecedent will. And I know that's not what this woman was trying to say, but I think that what she is saying can give way to it, and I know we'll discuss that further.
I'm almost certain that she's not aware of all of these different factions and
right.
the queer theology movement, which, that's okay, but like I said, have a cup of coffee, hear us out, please.
We will talk about it, but it's extremely likely that she's just speaking from a place of what she thinks is compassion.
Yeah, I think it's just understandable misplaced female compassion.
Yeah.
How sexist of you. But
well, I mean, if we're gonna go into sexism, just wait until you hear what the church fathers have to say about women.
Oh my
or
god.
the Bible.
Consensus.
A temple built over a sewer.
Patristic consensus is so wonderful. But yeah, I remember that too. I was thinking about that. I remember Michael Voris was furious.
Yeah, he asked the question to like the cardinals that
it was either Coco Palmero or Paglia or someone who is very is rumored.
I think it was like to Lombardi or something.
Yeah, one of those people. And when he asked them, what are you talking about? Positive elements, like, oh, that's too high for my pay grade in theological complexity. It's like, what? But what you just...
This is why it's important that, like, newcomers should look into this stuff. Like, people who are just starting their apostolates, people who are just starting their, like, apologetics, like, they should be aware of, like, all of the controversies that have happened throughout the Francis papacy.
Well, I mean, people also shouldn't take themselves so seriously, but that's a side thing. But what you were saying earlier about explaining what this person, this prelate at the synod, this idea of there being a positive good to the homosexual identity, to the inclination, because it is quote unquote created by God, is a radically different Catholic anthropology than from what we know from the tradition and reading the writing of the fathers and the doctors and the great mystics of the church.
Yes.
This is actually even a huge break with the classical theistic philosophy and accompanying like natural law theory, which Eve Tushnet says that she's not convinced by, which...
yeah, of course she isn't.
That should tell you one thing or the other. And so, but what basically, like, the new homophiles, as Ruse calls them, the side B people, these are people trying to be, oh, I'm Catholic, but I'm celibate and gay, and I delight in my gay identity, and God delights in my gay identity. They're offering something that's completely alien to the Catholic understanding of man, because when we talk about sexuality, we're talking about what is a human being, what is the mystery of man's sexuality for. And obviously, like, there's a lot of like blood and guts and like really like gritty stuff about sex and like the difficult stuff of human relationships, but like in order to act morally, to pursue the good, we have to think about, okay, what the hell is a man and what is he meant to do? And so in the tradition, what's funny?
I'm just laughing at something I'm thinking of saying. Can I just say it?
I mean, we'll see. Go ahead.
God just delights in my desire to have non-consensual intercourse with women because, see, in that is a reflection of the self-diffusive tendency of divine goodness and the fact that it just pours itself out. for the good of all around
Yeah, and you
And so when I, forcibly inject women with my
seed.
seed, I am simply diffusing my goodness indifferently and just unleashing
And
it
it
on the
may
world
be
around
the
me.
moral law says I ought not do this.
And
But
let's
what
not
unique gifts and qualities flow from this rapacious inclination? You could really get into
you,
And
this.
you could
let's
you
not
could get
forget.
all flowery about that shit too. Funny enough, that pagan guy, who's like pro LGBT, the pagan Platonist. I don't remember his name. He's like the leading pagan philosopher in the United States. Anyway, when he was confronted about like stories about divine rape and the myths, he's like, well, that's a metaphor for a diffusion of goodness that is at a level of the soul below that in which consent and volition exists. And I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me.
I mean, this is
That's
why
what he says.
This is why it's just so very important to retain a very rigid understanding of natural law and philosophical anthropology as it relates to human sexuality, because so long as we understand as fixed ontological axioms about the human person that male is unintelligible apart from female and female is unintelligible apart from male, and that these together in their unitive and procreative dimension reflect the design that God has imbued in us. If we have to retain that rigidly, or else we can slide into these ambiguous gray areas about like differently ordered inclinations. Like, that's a term that Father James Martin wants to bring into the lexicon. And why shouldn't he if the Homophiles are right?
And here's the thing: is that Martin is more obvious, subtly to some, but like if you read the queer theology, I hate that that's a term, but if you read like the queer theology literature, even from the side B crowd, Martin is much more radical than side B. Martin is probably basically a quietly side A person.
Yeah. Don't ask, don't tell, side A.
Right. Yeah. You know that document that tells him to stay in the closet? That's magisterial.
Yeah.
That order from his superior. That's magisterial.
Is it magisterial?
That's magisterial.
Okay.
But that's an old
have
joke.
To give religious sense of intellect
in a qualified sense.
Yeah. Okay. That's a bit on the nose.
We don't. I like Lofton, but it's like okay.
I do.
So on the topic though at hand is that so this prelate at the Sit on the Family talking about like these special unique gifts and whatever, that I don't even know if he's pulling from the side B gay Christian network Catholics like Eve Tushnet, and I forget the guy's name, but I know that his Patheos blog is called Mudblood Catholic. I don't want to make fun of it too long. I'm trying to make a point. They outright think that the inclination is a positive good given by God that gives them some type of extra spiritual sensitivity, that it makes me different, because and so they just say all of these like
okay, here's the thing about that. Spiritual sensitivity can exist completely independently of the desire to stick it in the ass. Okay? I'm sorry for being crude, but you can't not be crude when you're discussing so grievous a sin. I mean, this makes me think of the evolutionary arguments people make for like homosexuality. Can you indulge me? Like, well, see, it produces like gay uncles who can help their sisters take care of their kids. It's like, that's an argument for the evolution of celibacy. That's
Yes.
an argument for the evolution of people who don't have sexual desires.
None of this is related
If
to the
anything,
unnatural
okay.
vice.
Like,
and okay, I am just gonna say this, and this is not nearly as
Say it.
crude as what you said, but if okay, we don't need these side A and side B creaturas in the church, because if God wanted the church to have mediocre interior designers, he would have sent mediocre interior designers.
Yeah.
Well, and
Here's the thing. Here's one thing I want to say before we go on.
go ahead.
Kathy's thread,
We'll just say, yeah, that's who she
Yeah,
is.
okay.
Yeah.
her thread, I understand that it's not intending to reach any of these like terrible conclusions that we're talking about, but the moment you say that a faithful Catholic can explicitly identify as LGBTQ, you are saying that that identity, first of all, that acronym created by the church's enemies has validity in itself, and that someone can even like be, in an ontologically positive sense, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer, or whatever. I mean, it gives so much validity to this. But secondly, to say that a faithful Catholic can explicitly identify that way is implicitly to say that there's a sort of, like I said, ontological positivity to that identity. And if there is an ontological positivity to that identity, then it is created by God, because only God only creates real being, and all real being is directly from God.
because
Evil
sin
is a
is
privation
privation.
of a do-good. It's a lack of being where it should be, and so if you imbue that identity with reality, which seems to be what she's doing, at least implicitly, inadvertently, I think you have to answer for, well, if this inclination, if this identity has reality to it, has divinely imbued reality to it, why would God ask me not to act on it, or ask,
Yes, indeed.
why would he? It seems kind of unfair in that sense. If God has imbued in me this identity that might be, outside the sphere of natural law, yet if it has reality, then
Right.
it should have a teleology to it. It should have an order, an orientation to it. It should be another orientation. That's the word, It should be a sexual orientation. If it has reality in it.
The
But
church
if it doesn't have reality, if it doesn't have positive reality, then we cannot give any credence to that label. We cannot give any credence to and any kind of affirming language surrounding the inclination. We simply have to treat it as a disordered inclination that you resist as best you can, with the help of grace,
If I may,
strive to
CT,
live in that state of grace. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
recognize it as bad and you resist it.
Yes.
That's the first step. God does not create privation. God allows
Exactly.
privation for greater goods. The obvious good that's supposed to come from disordered inclinations is the sanctification of your person by overcoming those desires. And so when the queer theology people, and I mean, this is in scripture where when you give yourself over to a reprobate mind, when the darkness blinds you and you start calling good evil and evil good. When the queer theology people and the influence that it has had on like Tumblr and creating, this queer Catholic subculture, they want the removal of that language of disorder, of intrinsically disordered, because it hurts their feelings, because they think that this identity is intrinsically to who they are. But in the churches, and again, this is, you want to talk about what's magisterial. This is in.
Okay, can I
Let me finish. Really quick. in the church's own pastoral documents from even the most milquetoast of modern bishops' conferences, but also from John Paul II's pen and from Benedict's pen and from the CDF's pen Paul VI's pen, is the understanding that no, this is a disorder that is to be overcome. We know what the church is teaching on what man's sexuality is, what it's for, what it means, the spiritual consequences and implications of that. And in light of that, homosexuality is a disorder. It just is. It's not cruel. It's not mean. It's sensible. And it's also that the church has pastorally attempted for years, with no support from some of the worst of the liberal episcopacy, with organizations like Courage International, who try to accompany people that are trying to resist the homosexual urge. And they don't get money. They don't get to support. They get dismissed by these bloggers like Eve Tushnet. And I'll get in more into it, but go ahead, Friar. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
I'm saying that calling their orientation or whatever intrinsically good and having been actively willed by God and not merely permitted is exactly the same as taking the exalted, taking the expression of Felix Culpa in the exalted, fortunate sin, fortunate fall, because it's to mistake, it's to misattribute any potential, any possible good that can come from a privation, that can come from a sin, to that sin itself. It misattributes any good thing to
I'm glad
the
you
bad
brought
thing
that up.
itself.
I'm glad you brought
yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the Felix Culpa, because
Oh, happy fall.
they might point to that to say, well, we say happy fault in the exalted for the Easter Vigil, therefore can we not talk about positive dimensions of the homosexual inclination? First of all, I mean, happy fault is only said because it brought about the Redeemer, who has no relationship to sin.
Yes.
Christ is the antithesis of sin. He is the antidote to sin, the opposite of sin. So if you're going to talk about any kind of positive dimension to like the homosexual inclination, it could only be found in overcoming it completely, eradicating its roots, and living in accordance with the natural law. If we're going to call it a happy fault, the happiness could only be found in that.
Yeah, precisely. I'm glad you brought that up. And so the people that the side B Catholics always dismiss are, and they call them side X, because it's like, oh, X is dangerous, chemical X, the evil, bad, edgy. And what side X is they are people who are mostly, I think, outside the gay Christian network, organization and message board and so on, that are saying, this is ridiculous. Yes, I have this inclination, that the side X people will say, but what they want to do is they say, it's not good, I am obedient to the church, but I want to overcome it. And some of them even believe in reparative therapy, which is completely verboten.
Oh, that's evil. That's
That's bad. You're not allowed to do it.
Keep in mind, there are formerly gay people who swear by reparative therapy.
Yeah.
We're not even talking about forcing it on people, because
Yeah, I mean,
but there are some who voluntarily took it and who swear by it.
Well,
They
Father
think
James
it's
Martin
great.
literally wants that to, he wants the church to condemn reparative therapy as a violation of human rights or something.
And look, to put
So
it
what?
in,
So what? I need to. So let's say I am a chronic masturbator, which I'm not, by the way. And I want to quit it. Is trying to lose the desire to masturbate? Is that against human rights?
Well,
Yes.
what's interesting about it is Father James Martin would be right if you grant even the subtlest inclination towards his position, which is what I'm afraid Kathy's thread inadvertently, implicitly
That
yields
it's a
to.
positive reality with a telos.
Yeah.
Fulfilling
And
that
Because
telos
if it
a good
is,
thing.
it is actively willed by God, and it would be wrong to try to root out the source of it.
but it's not.
There's clearly no telos to homosexual desire. Come
right.
on, like. So James Martin, I was listening to him talk last night because I like to hate watch Trent Horn as he. Well, no, I like Trent Horn, but I like to hate watch him critiquing people like James Martin. So I was listening to James Martin for Trent Horn. Anyway, so one of the things he brought up was, well, there's this gay couple. They've known each other for several years, and one of those gay people has this awful, crippling illness. Wonder what that is. And he's been taking care of him for like a decade. And, I think that even the most fundamentalist, close-minded trad would look at that and be like, that is a love I don't understand, but that I have to respect. And it's like,
Nope.
okay, no, because here's the two things. One, I have male bros here that I would take a full magazine from a Gatling gun for, and I know it. No, you know what I'm saying. I would take a bunch of bullets for my male friends, partially because I'm suicidally depressed, but also because I love you guys. Okay.
Mhm.
Now,
Uh-huh.
do I need to desire your ass to want to take a bullet for you? No, not at all.
But-
in fact,
but, like-
not at all.
But this,
In fact, that would probably be counterproductive, because if I desired your ass, you guys would no doubt reject me, and then I would resent you for it. And I want to add something else to that. It doesn't matter if I'm healing you in a hospital when I'm simultaneously participating in the ruination of that person's soul.
and here's the thing. Go ahead.
Lastly, Trent Horn brings this up. Okay, what if there's a guy who's committing adultery on his wife with his mistress, but his mistress is blind and disabled, and he is constantly tending to her needs and helping?
That's actually a good point.
That's good. That's good that he's helping her. But one, the motivation is completely wrong. Two, that good can exist completely independently of any desire to sleep with a woman who isn't your spouse.
Yeah.
Can you imagine someone identifying as an adulterer? Well, it reflects a desire to love everyone around you and to spread your essence and your goodness, and it reflects the fecundity of the inner Trinitarian life. You could talk like that. You could talk like
Now,
that.
it would be wrong.
Straight...
It would not actually be like.
Yeah.
But people could use those poetics incorrectly.
Yes.
Well, and they do.
A lot of people wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
They
That
do.
is a straightforward extension. That is a straightforward extension of all the homophilic shit that people say.
Yeah, and the thing of it is that they say, the side B homophiles, who, this is the new element that we're going to talk about too, is about spiritual friendship, okay? But like the side B homophiles think that the inclination of homosexuality makes them somehow more sensitive, and therefore implicitly it's implied, and I think they sometimes even say it out loud. I've read so much of their stuff that it's kind of garbling together. But they think that this inclination, which is fundamentally disordered, gives them the spiritual superpower to be more empathetic, to be more
It's like
loving.
autism is my superpower, but like homosexuality.
That is gay narcissism on steroids. And let me just say, okay, the rates of domestic abuse among gay couples, the rates of infidelity tell me that no, your homosexual desires ain't conferring no superpower. Okay?
I think that like side B is another symptom of being horribly middle class, incredibly sheltered. And now this is me being terse. So anyone who was like
And-
go ahead.
And as I've said before, the only positive thing in a homosexual relationship is the AIDS status, is whether or not they have
HIV.
AIDS.
That's
Yeah,
the only positive
HIV,
thing about a gay
yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
Qua-gay relationship.
Yeah. And again, we using gay and LGBT as like, okay, like the lords of darkness control the discourse. We need to push back as much as we can, but using gay or LGBT as a colloquialism is one thing, but like affirming this in theological language and insisting that Holy Mother Church write it down and bless it with a gold pen, that's ridiculous.
Right? Yeah, I mean, it is
do
different
these-
because like what the thread was doing was talking to faithful Catholics who identified themselves in those terms, and that's you cannot do.
What are you gonna say, something, Friar?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do these people actually think that they can subvert those expressions, those words? Because I have noticed this conceit that a lot of these people have. It's the same kind of conceit that leads even good people like Cardinal Sarah to say that that the Novus Ordo and the traditional Latin Mass can learn from each other. It's on the same spectrum of conceit.
Well, it's part of. I mean, we're getting kind of meta here, but it's because of the spirit of egalitarianism. Of how liberalism like dissolves all values as long as they're not a threat to commerce. And stuff like that. But that's kind of a little bit beyond the purpose. So the other thing I should talk about is we talked on In Taberna proper last week, CT, about the German bishops, very briefly, and their nonsense and the blessings and all that. What the Homophiles, as Austin Ruse so aptly puts it, so there is a connecting tissue between the very progressive, obviously theologically heterodox, obviously heterodox liberal wackos like James Martin, like Maria 2.0 in Germany, wanting to bless gay unions and their positive elements. But the other one is not merely that the side B Catholic homophiles want to recognize homosexuality as a positive good, which it is not. They also want the church to bring back a type of paraliturgical ceremony of commitment to spiritual friendship. And like they read medieval literature about like battle brothers and knights like making vows to each other, and they interpret that as being, air quotes, gay.
Yes, that is.
I want to say something and reiterate something. I love you guys more than any gay man loves his partner.
Oh,
That
man.
is true. That is true.
Well, it's because you will our good.
Because I will your good.
And you know what, Terilien?
Uh-huh.
I personally am not flattered by that, because what you just held your love up against, that's a very, very low bar.
I know, right?
Well, the thing is about it, if anything, if you want to establish a category of like spiritual friendship among like I mean, just in general, because it could be between people of the same sex or people of the opposite sex. What you would have to conclude as a Catholic is that the homosexual inclination is in itself a disruption of that.
And they take Abbot Alred, Saint Alred, who was that 11th century abbot Cistercian who wrote the Book of Spiritual Friendship, and they just completely mangle it.
Right.
On Crisis, Deacon Jim has very good takedowns of that. But, this thread by, Kathy Q that we're talking about, and again, if you listen to this, we're not saying attack her.
Right.
We're
not a bad person.
No, what we're saying is, like, we need to... And I understand, like, mocking the thread, Twitter is Twitter, there's some of this, but this is why you can't post oblivious things like that.
Yeah.
And it's because this stuff exists in the real world, and the world...
And there are
taken in a
people-
certain way.
There are camps in the church who are a lot more sophisticated than well-meaning Catholic moms are, and they will pounce on every subtle lack of precision they can, and use that to advance their agenda, and they know how to do it. So you have to be very vigilant.
We're talking about
this.
agents of agents of darkness, to kind of use overwrought language, but we're talking about very bad people that take money from world governments and from world corporations and from these ancient crusty like liches in these old aristocratic families that want this degeneracy to be normalized for the sake of bad ends.
If I can borrow a bit from linguistics here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between semantics and pragmatics. Okay? Semantics is basically what is literally being communicated and said. When I'm saying, can you pass... when I say, can you pass the potatoes, I am literally saying, are you able to pass the potatoes? But pragmatically, what I'm saying is, are you able to pass the potatoes? And the person thinks, he's asking me if I'm able to pass the potatoes. That must mean that he wants potatoes, because that's the only way and that's relevant. So when someone talks about how there are positive elements to gay relationships in front of an audience without like a bunch of qualifiers, the first thing that's going to pop up in their brain is, oh, he's trying to say that homosexuality is a safe thing to do. Because I could talk about positive elements, right, of playing on the side of the cliff, with no fence or anything like that. And completely fail to communicate, oh, by the way, if you do that, you're going to fall.
Right.
And you're going to break your neck.
And
right?
die.
There are positive elements of playing on the side of the cliff. The side of the cliff is beautiful, and it's playing. Playing is good. But the thing is, evil is privation. There ain't enough grass there, and you'll fall. Likewise, I can talk about all the positive aspects of homosexual relationships, and that's going to make people think, oh, he's recommending it, or he's saying it's safe. But, no, you're going to fall, and you're going to break your neck and die of AIDS.
As the boomers say, Terilien, bravo. But you read that article that was being passed around about the packet. So another element of like this stuff does not exist in a vacuum, because this will probably, we got a couple minutes left. So, but like you read the City Journal article about that Pakistani father and the transitioning, right?
That was awful, and it hit very close to home.
It did the rounds on Twitter a little bit.
Yeah. So long story short, this was a very, very intelligent autistic teenager, 13-year-old, I think, had a mental breakdown. He was very sensitive. He didn't really have friends. He was a brony. He was into My Little Pony. And then they told his father, who was a devout Muslim, yeah, your son is trans, and like you need to affirm him. And he panicked, right? He was really, really worried. It's like, well, what the hell is this? And it's like, we're not going to let you take him back unless you like affirm him, and basically he spoke to his lawyers, and they basically just told him, okay, just go yeah, I'll help him transition and stuff like that, and then leave the state, which he did. He quit his very lucrative job and he left the state of Washington. The kid is fine now. He no longer identifies as trans. He's still, a brony and stuff like that. And here's an important thing to mention about that. Autistic people are actually disproportionately likely to identify as trans for numerous reasons. One of them is let's say you are an autistic guy. You don't really fit in with the boys. But, some girls, they feel sorry for her and their maternal instinct kicks in and they sort of adopt you. And then over time, you become accustomed to their mannerisms and to their way. You start adopting female mannerisms and female ways of talking. And you start to feel better, and you start thinking, maybe if I was a woman, I could overcome my autism. And it's the same with females with autism, but in the other direction. They'll start hanging out with guys because they get along with them better, and then they'll think, maybe if I just fully transition, I'll overcome my autism. Anyway, you have stuff like that, and it's really, really freaking awful.
And it's like, and so the lords of the world that push this dreck.
Oh, I just want to say one more thing.
Go ahead, yeah.
Real quick. Yeah, like in British Columbia, there was a guy who lost his custody of his child and wasn't allowed to see her anymore because he was misgendering her. Yeah. The West Coast is really, 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 really bad about this.
Oh, it's a haunted forest.
They will take away your kids and pump them full of hormones because they watched My Little Pony and some psychiatrist convinced them that meant that they were actually a girl.
Yeah, no, the Pacific Northwest is a haunted forest. It's disturbing as hell.
It was never really exercised.
No.
Yeah, no wonder then that they filmed the Twilight movies in the Pacific Northwest.
So that's the context when you're just like, okay, well, what can we do to help gay people? And it's like, okay, you are already conceding a mile's worth of territory.
Yeah.
And you're already only a few degrees of separation from Father James Martin.
I want to add something. The church has not mistreated gay people historically or anything like that. They don't have like these special pastoral needs that they can't already find. The church offers confession. Yes. Okay, you confess to a priest. You don't care what you did. You could confess to like how you masturbated to frickin' the most messed up hentai out there. I mean, unless it's like child porn, in which case they're probably going to freak out. But the most messed up illegal porn out there, and they'll be like, here's your penance, ego te absolvo, you know?
Yeah.
They'll be supportive. You want advice, they'll be supportive.
And
they don't have these special pastoral needs that are just being completely neglected. And as for the past, where, homosexuals were put to death and stuff like that, and, we need to apologize for our treatment of homosexuals, it's like, you're in the wrong religion.
Well, I mean, and there's also the fact that, like, back then, the standard for sexual morality was
very high.
Yeah, and very widely encouraged and established, such that if you deviated from that, you knew exactly what you were doing.
Like, if you could be basically like a pro-family Marxist and have a pro-family Marxist taste, because most of those homosexuals that were burnt were nobles, and it was the common people who cried out to the authorities, both secular and ecclesiastic, to get rid of those gay nobles. And, it's like, okay, you want to oppress the values of the proletariat, or whatever.
And
anyway.
Then be homophobic and like.
But so that's where we're at now. Vows of spiritual friendship.
In 2018, in September in 2018, sodomy was legalized in India. Everyone in India who was of that inclination, or their supporters and so forth, they um, cried out for joy, right? But the thing is, the police, they don't care. The magistrates, they don't care. Like, they are, if they find out something, they're gonna beat you up.
So, so all of this stuff exists in context, and we're at the point where Blue's Clues, a show, whose demographic is children 3 to 5, is showing cartoon characters of a drag queen doing a gay pride rendition of, the soldiers marched one by one, hurrah, hurrah, with showing all these different gay families, these queer families, including a little beaver girl with top mastectomy surgery scars for transitioning. This is in a show for 3 to 5. And so, when we're not speaking for myself, when I say these things, it's not like, okay, get out of the church, no one wants you. It's that you need to conform to the good.
Yeah.
And it's that this is a delusion. The church is not what you think it is. You are completely misreading the Gospels. And it's like, you have the entire tradition, and what the new Homophiles do, what people like Eve Tushnet and Mudblood Catholic, is they're just like, oh, I have the special snowflake magic lens to read this, to see how the church should exalt my identity and my boyfriend, who I don't have sex with, but he's still my boyfriend, but I just call him my deep spiritual friend.
Yeah, let's
But in reality,
what they're really doing, what they're really asking for is for the church to consecrate a near occasion of sin.
Yeah.
yeah,
Assuming,
that's
Go ahead,
that's what
CT.
if you have deep, sorry.
Okay.
yeah. Well, I was just gonna say it's only because the church has, in many ways, tried the suggestions of the new Homophiles within recent years. I would argue that it's really been allowed to get this bad, down to where we're having like homosexual predation in Blue's Clues shows. Like a lot of these people would agree that kind of thing is abhorrent, but the more we capitulate to like new homophile lexicon, the worse it's going to be, because there's going to be no pushback.
The thing I'll say
that means anything.
The thing I'll say to people like Kathy Q is that he might be too edgy for you, but listen to Milo on what the gay lifestyle is really like.
Go read, or just go and read about Gate and Douglas.
You know what?
For example.
You know what really destroyed my sympathy for the gay community completely, forever?
Huh.
The Gift.
Right, bug chasing.
The movie The Gift, about bug chasers, and there was the standard bleep party.
Yeah, standard fuck party.
Okay. So we're not PG-13.
No, PG-13 means you get one F-bomb. I used mine because I didn't really need it for this one. But yeah, all of this stuff exists in context. We've already kind of gone over my time, but this first one will be, I think we'll go for just a little bit more, and then we'll probably wrap it up. In the future, these will be a little bit shorter. But the conversation was good enough that I thought that it was worth going on.
Can I say something?
Mm-hmm.
It's quite important to highlight just how sheltered these allies of the LGBT community are. Again, I bring up a lot of Family Guy references because I love Family Guy, but there was this scene in what, season 17 or season 18 or whatever, where in this alternate universe inside a Family Guy, they showed Joe and Quagmire as a gay couple, right? And they said, as network TV gays, we can only adopt babies, go jogging, and pucker kiss.
Huh?
And that's important because that,
Oh, okay.
yeah, because that image of being these so
The media
basically
presents a very sanitized image of gays.
Well,
very, very, very sanitized image. It's like
But
they
it's not even
have
sanitized. It's just fantasy.
Yeah.
So this is an Insider Magazine, Insider.com article. The debate over kink at Pride divides the internet, but the kink community has been part of queer protest and celebration since the Stonewall riots. And when we're talking about these people that dress up in leather costumes like dogs. You know, they call them leather daddies and the BDSM stuff and all of this, frankly, degeneracy that people want children to be subjected to publicly.
Well, it's important to recognize that precisely because the homosexual inclination is divorced from the natural complementarity of procreative and unitive marital activity, every single homosexual sexual encounter necessarily has to be of a much more deviant nature than most straight couples could stomach between themselves. So I feel like homosexual deviancy, like BDSM stuff, it almost necessarily gets a disproportionate pass by most people because like it kind of necessarily comes with the territory.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Let me read a little bit from this Insider article, okay? So this was the part that was the most interesting to me. And you have to remember what Harvard University is as an institution, the millions of dollars it gets every year. So just keep that in mind, as I read this. Michael Bronsky, a professor of the practice in media and activism and studies of women, gender, and sexuality at Harvard University, told insiders that in the past, many LGBTQ people viewed marriage equality as a step towards that assimilation into society rather than liberation. Assimilation into heteronormativity. Many people, quote, many people wanted to frame marriage as a form of heteronormativity, as a marker of acceptance, Bronsky said. I think it's a false designation because the way you look at it, as it's simply a legal contract on equality under the law. According to Bronsky, what made marriage equality a question of assimilation is so much about the symbol of what gay marriage means to people. And so, you can watch YouTube videos about how they managed to get same-sex acceptance up there. And what they did is on normal, well-adjusted family people, and, this is why I'm admittedly very... I'm somewhat of a recluse. I'm not really a recluse. I know people. I don't like people, okay? I don't like normies, all right? I don't like normies. And the reason is because people fall for this shit. At first, they presented the fight for same-sex marriage as, well, you're denying people legal rights, which this Harvard professor admitted that was the frame that they internally, the homosexual movement, or as some pro-family activists call them, homosexualists, they themselves internally understood this is just about legal rights and contracts. I want to be a freak and all this stuff. People like Dave Rubin are actually abnormal. And that's because Dave Rubin is a boring neoliberal. Okay?
Yeah.
But the people that were the mover and the shakers in the same-sex marriage legalization movement back then understood that we need this so that we can do more crazy butt stuff.
Yeah.
And it being sanctioned by society. But what all of the Soros money and all of the, Dan Savages and all this stuff, they turned it into an issue about, one, well, these people just want to be happy. They want to be in a loving, committed relationship. They used people like Dave Rubin, and Dave Rubin basically practically didn't exist at this point, as an archetype, I mean, saying you don't want to deny people the right to marry, to be happy, doing all this saccharine yeah, and so and then the second thing that they focused on was the Dan Savage. Oh, it's anti-bullying. You can't be mean to gay people. Don't be mean to gay people. And so through these two strategies, they completely recontextualized the memeplex. And for those who are more on the normie spectrum, and just because you don't think you're a normie doesn't mean you are. You're always a normie to somebody and in some milieu. Keep that in mind. But for the memeplex, which is the cloud of ideas, the structure of ideas and narrative and talking points and symbols and thoughts, the normie memeplex, our culture basically, completely adopted a positive view of same-sex marriage. And Obergefell v. Hodge, even though it wasn't by vote by the American people, it was met by thunderous applause. And
it would have passed by vote.
And the trends show that we were talking about this the other day, CT. 70% approval?
Yeah, I mean, with all the caveats of how bad polling is these days, yes, I mean it is. Like, look, it didn't have to get passed by a vote to know that it would have gotten passed by a vote if it were held. Like,
and this is the thing that makes me really angry. And Austin Ruse is kind of a boomer. I'd love to talk to him. We haven't praised him enough in this because we're just talking about the content and how he exposed this nonsense. Because at first, the Janet Smith, the theologian Janet Smith, who's a nice lady, but she's a maternal personality, and it's very easy for that instinct to be subverted into, allowing for bad things when you're just trying to be nice. But she was like, no, we shouldn't call them new homophiles because that's derisive. We should just call them the spiritual friends. And so Austin then called them the spiritual friends for, one post, and then he got sick of it and is like, no, they're the homophiles. That's who they are.
The spiritual friends? That doesn't sound in any way, critical at all.
Well, it's because it's we should use the terms they want because we don't have a time. But this is what the left does.
And that's the heart of the issue that inspired this episode.
Yeah.
And it's a
never concede to their terminology because that's going to completely muddle the way you sound to everyone else, if nothing else.
And honestly, it will let's say you're just trying to seed terminology for purely strategic purposes. The more you do it, the more you're going to condition yourself to concede more and more in your own thinking.
Yeah. This isn't... Yeah, and, the world's just getting darker and retreating into delusions of, nuanced tradition. And I am going after Kathy's article a little bit here now. We'll talk about it another time, maybe even next week. But world's getting darker. It's going to get a whole lot worse.
Yeah.
A lot worse. We just talked about a children's show aimed at 3 to 5-year-olds that had a singing animated drag queen who was a real drag queen and real homosexualist activist who wants your kids to find this behavior to be normalized and very obvious.
By the way, the writer of that song literally owns a children's program called Queer Kid Stuff. So it's
oh god,
it gets even worse.
It's a form of
Okay, I have a little confession to make. I watched Blue's Clues when I was 15.
Do you?
That's fine.
Okay.
Do you want?
You're autistic.
Okay.
I mean, I was a big fan of Blue's Clues as a little kid.
Okay, cool.
Do you want me to leave that in?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay, I'll leave that in. But, you know, that's where it is, you know, and so it's like, this isn't to attack Kafe and Taberna. Hey, if she wants to join us on In Taberna and talk about it, if she hears this, she's welcome to.
Yeah.
You know, I'll talk
and
to her.
I promise to not be mean to her.
Well, I mean, we'll see who would be on that, but, like, because that would be a guest-centric show. What? I'm not saying you're not welcome. But anyway, any closing thoughts, guys?
I think we covered it. I mean, I guess I would just say, be very vigilant of the linguistic tactics of our enemies.
Mm-hmm.
You don't cede to them. Maintain the precision not only of your theological language, but of theological ideas in your own thinking. Make sure that you are not capitulating in your own understanding of these issues. And when in doubt, read the church fathers on this stuff. Read the doctors of the church on this stuff. You can even read recent magisterial propositions on this.
Read the Bible.
Yes. Read sacred scripture on this. You read Ratzinger's CDF documents on like the pastoral approach to homosexuality or whatever it's called. Just make sure you are you have sufficiently reflected on this in a theologically sound way before you think of tactics of outreach to these people. You have to be clear in your own mind before you can preach the truth to others.
My final point is that, piggybacking, you know, on what CT said, is that these people that you're trying to outreach have their own milieu. They have their own memeplex. You are waging a war of ideas. You are raging meme war. You are raging info war.
Yeah.
And what you are doing is you are essentially trying to save someone who is a hostage to an evil memeplex. And you're not going to do that by affirming principles of that memeplex, because that's the equivalent of shooting yourself first in the foot to show that you have goodwill. No. Be charitable. Fight with love, but fight.
It's like how leftists use phraseology like dismantle white supremacy, dismantle the patriarchy. You have to see your job as dismantling these memeplexes, to use your word.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to dismantle queer theology.
Yes.
We have to dismantle the oppression of the bourgeois homosexualist movement. Go ahead, sorry.
And it's also important to keep in mind that always keep in mind the possibility that the people you want to reach out to perhaps don't want to be reached out to. That is also something to keep in mind. Like, difficult as that may sound, sometimes they really don't want that.
They just have a list of demands, and if you're not going to meet them, they're not interested in anything else.
Yeah.
Do you have final words, Terilien?
Dude, there are queer theologians who say Jesus Christ was gay. And I mean, if homosexuality can be this gift from God with like a positive ontological reality with a telos, and that's not out of the question. If you actually believe that. But we know that's out of the question. That is disgusting.
There's even more that we could talk about.
It goes so deep.
It really does. It's a very evil rabbit hole. You have to have fire and sword, metaphorically.
I ain't going down that rabbit hole.
I've done it, and it's
You can do it for me and then tell me what you find.
Oh, you know what? Anyway, but As always, there's going to be a paste bin, a link of all of our resources and articles. I would recommend to everyone to check it out, including Austin Reeves' wonderful, wonderful, wonderful new homophile articles. The one thing that he discusses that I did not cover, but I will mention briefly here at the end, is about their blithe indifference to the threat that the homosexualist movement is to family values and to this idea of kids being preyed upon in the classroom through propaganda. The new homophiles just care about their pet ivory tower project and nothing else. And it might be because it's autistic, it might be because they're narcissistic, it might be because they're selfish. There's all types of reasons why, but
fundamentally, it's because they're gay.
There it is. It's because they are homosexual. As a colloquial. Anyway. But thank you for joining us, Kafe and Taberna, guys. I think this was a good one. As I said, future installments will be much shorter, and we're going to try to see if we can do a regular Wednesday schedule, but as always, no promises. But once more, thank you for joining us at Kafe and Taberna, where we can converse.